Sometime between summer 2020 and February of this year, I woke up one day with a terrible realization. I was kinda over BL. So let's talk about it. The fact that it's only 3:30 p.m. and it looks like I'm filming at night. I love winter. BL fatigue. Fatigue, French word that expresses extreme tiredness resulting from mental or physical exertion. In the case of the internet, mostly used for mental exhaustion. As for BL, I went over its definition many times on this channel and I'm pretty sure you know what it is, so let's skip over it today. For a good solid 6 months, I, Axel, 22, huge fan of BL since 2017, experienced fatigue about BL. It's not that I stopped watching them or even stopped enjoying some of them. Hell, my favorite BL shows of 2020 were released during that period. But I did start feeling overall less excited to start new series, more like it was a duty to keep up with airing BL shows, and mediocre dramas didn't hold the same entertaining value they once had. For a while, I questioned myself. Do I not like BL anymore? And just as I started considering the unthinkable, a lighthouse seemed to appear in the foggy night. The incessant releases started subsiding and I could finally enjoy BL again. So I know what you're gonna tell me.
But Axel, if you're over that BL fatigue, why are you making this video?
And that is very simple. Firstly, I do think it's a topic worth exploring because I know for a fact that I'm not the only one who felt like this. And secondly, even though that feeling is gone for now and for me, it doesn't mean it cannot come back. I am certain that as COVID hopefully finally leaves us alone, the reason for this BL fatigue, spoiler alert, it's the insane release rates of BL series, will come back. And for me that is very telling of a problem that is almost unique to BL as a genre, how linked to overconsumption of content it is. What about other people? So as I have now the option to create community posts, yay! I've asked you guys if you've experienced BL fatigue too, and the responses are, even at the small scale of my community on here, very telling. 53% have said yes and I still do, which is quite worrying in my books to be honest. That's more than half of my respondents. Even if this poll is not representative of the whole BL fandom, I do think it's still very telling. Then 15% were like me and said yes but not anymore, which means that 68% of the respondents in total have had or still do experience BL fatigue, while 16% said they didn't and 16% said they weren't sure. So that's quite a good chunk of people. And now I want to highlight the very interesting comments I got under my posts. It hasn't made me fatigued, but I found that it's made me much pickier. Like years ago, it used to be that I watched everything even if it was bad because there wasn't that much queer representation. Now I drop shows a lot quicker if I don't like them because there's literally so many other things to watch and I don't have to settle anymore for mediocrity. I'm not sure if it's the increasing rate of releases or the weak quality during the pandemic or both, or if one is causing the other. For me, it's just the fact that since there's so much coming out now, it's hard to tell which one will be of quality. I think as time went by, I became disinterested in the usual stories as well as the fact that I already have a few I love and go back to. I'm still excited for some, or at least watch them, but I skipped out on so many. I still get excited for a couple, but I feel there are just so many that I can't keep up. I've been suffering from BL fatigue for a while. I feel like of 10 BL that come out, only one is worth it, and to find the one that's worth it is the difficult part. Still watch, I just get to be more selective now. Honestly, the fact that there's so many coming out and most of them have had terrible storylines, I just want some originality. So overall we can see that the incessant releases and the overall weaker quality of the shows are the two common themes of these responses, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. My BL fatigue symptoms. So now before I dive deeper into what's causing that overwhelming BL fatigue for a lot of us, I want to talk about my particular symptoms. I very quickly started getting overwhelmed by the releases of BL shows in 2020. In fact, I do remember very vividly that my last watch shows that I 100% enjoyed were Together, Why Are You, and My Engineer. And And honestly, I'm not the most in touch with the BL fandom, but I personally feel as if those were the last, let's say, Thai BL shows that were incredibly successful. Like these 3 shows airing back to back to back were some of the most vivid moments of my fandom experience in the BL fandom. And right after that, Filipino shows started airing one after the other. And I gotta be honest, because I'm always very transparent, at the time I did resent Filipino shows for many reasons. The first one being the pettiest, which is that I, as a Thai drama stan, don't want another country to produce more BL shows than Thailand and kinda steal their thunder. The second reason is a bit more justified in my opinion. It's that, coupled with all the other releases from other countries, there was simply too much BL. And I'm gonna talk about it in more details in a minute, but BL as a genre is very special in the way that BL fans will watch every BL under the sun. I mean, at least until the BL boom of 2020. And so many shows were getting released, and at one point I was watching 16 shows currently airing at the same time. Like, frankly, at that time it seemed normal, but today I'm watching between 3 and 8 currently airing shows, so I genuinely can't fathom how I was pulling that off. So I was watching shows all the time. I was in front of BL shows multiple times a day, and at first it was fun. I discovered a bit of Filipino culture which I knew nothing about prior to that. I started watching Korean BL shows which also started getting released in 2020, and overall it was enjoyable until the rhythm of 16 series a week started wearing me out. Not necessarily because I wasn't enjoying the shows anymore, but because there were so many releases, I now couldn't watch everything that was airing. We went from about 15 BL shows airing a year to 50. Of course I had to make choices. And I also watched a couple really terrible BL shows that deterred me from giving everyone a fair chance, and overall made me become more picky. And then during summer 2020, I realized I was kinda sick of BL. I would like a show, love it even, yet feel none of the excitement I used to have for shows a year prior. A thing I used to do in 2019, which helped with cementing my love for certain shows a lot, was rewatching the episodes multiple times after they aired. For example, for Theory of Love, I would watch the episode the first time on the day it aired, once later that night to kind of analyze the scenes further, and a third time during the week to prepare myself for the upcoming next episode. That meant I spent way more time with a show. For the 12 weeks it aired, it truly became an integral part of my life. But in 2020, I didn't have the time to rewatch the shows anymore, even if I wanted to. The only ones for which I watched the episode twice were I Told Sunset About You and Cherry Magic, coincidentally my 2 favorite shows of last year. But then again, even with that, I still didn't feel the same excitement over them that I used to feel. And for the most part, I spent 8 months going through the motion. Then in 2021, things started calming down. By the end of 2020, I had already started watching way less BL and becoming more picky with what I watched. But that was accompanied by COVID becoming suddenly way worse in Thailand, prompting all of their shows to halt production for a good few months. That suddenly meant way less releases. And frankly, I immediately felt a shift. I still haven't felt extremely excited about most shows. For example, I loved 1,000 Stars, yet didn't feel the same excitement over it like I did for Dark Blue Kiss. A show I'd say I loved just as much, if not a little less, but was released a year and a couple of months prior, and so I was way more excited for that. But I also started enjoying mediocre shows again, like Fish Upon the Sky that has many flaws, the biggest one being that its freaking love interest Mork sucks ass. Spoiler alert, he will be in my next video. Yet I still enjoyed it because it was one of the only shows going on at the time, and my mind was present. It was open to liking the good it had to offer. So today I'd say I'm mostly back to normal, though since the releases of 2021 haven't been up to par, I'm still generally a lot more blasé about them than usual. My issue though is that COVID is not gonna be forever. And obviously that's not an issue. Fuck off COVID, no one wants you. But the issue lies in the fact that the incessant releases of BL shows are very likely to come back. In fact, I know they're coming back because so many series have already been announced for 2022. And let me remind you of all the shows that couldn't air in 2021 and have been postponed to next year. BL fatigue is still lurking around, ready to take over, and I'm scared. Overconsumption and BL. So that leads me to my next point that is really the center of today's video. Overconsumption. So not to go all crazy anti-capitalist on you, but I think we're all aware that our capitalistic world leads to more consumption, especially with the rise of the internet. People are buying more clothes than ever, throwing away more food than ever, and with streaming sites like Netflix, we're watching more shows than ever. Overconsumption is now ingrained in our lifestyle. We always want more, think we need more, and at least in the West, we do get more. So to apply this to BL, it's no surprise that BL is being consumed in the same way as many other series, one after the other. Today we're basically always watching something. We get more choices, but we also spend more time watching them because there's more choices. And BL is very special in the sense that it doesn't function like other genres. For example, let's say I love teen series. Well, it would be very surprising that I have watched all of the following shows: Sex Education, Atypical, Glee, Degrassi, Generation, 13 Reasons Why, Outer Banks, Elite, On My Block, Faking It, Pretty Little Liars, and I could continue forever because the point is that there's a lot of teen series out there. And that even if you love the genre, you will not watch all the shows in it. For example, and granted I've kind of stopped watching non-Asian dramas in the past 2 years, but I love teen series and I've only watched a handful of those. But if you ask me about BL, I have 150 shows to tell you about. Granted, I watch way too many shows, and honestly, if one person has to go to jail for watching too much BL, yeah, it's me. Hello. But the thing is, I know I'm not the only one. I see you all in my comments telling me about the same shows I already know about or have already watched. And I want this to be the main point that you take away from this video. But watching BL functions a lot like collecting shows. The thing with the BL fandom is that we do not do the same thing that I've just talked about for teen series. I don't know where this came from, but somehow we all silently but collectively decided to be aware of every BL show ever at all time and also watch all of them. It's genuinely insane to me that once you enter the BL fandom, that starts with watching BL shows. Mine was Sotus, I know I say it in every goddamn video I do. And then you move on to another BL show. And then I did Waterboy, Lovesick, Make It Right, the History series, What the Duck, Puppy Honey, Love by Chance, and I could continue forever. And the funny thing is that I hadn't officially joined the BL fandom while watching any of these shows. I would just see recommendations for them in the comments or just search for them online and then watch the next show. And I know I'm not the only one, because everyone in the BL fandom is like me. We collect BL shows like they're fucking Pokemons. And a big part of it is that there's no other genre on earth that is as prolific and as gay as BL. And yeah, that's what makes BL special. But that's what also makes the overproduction of it so worrisome. Because until now, we've been aware of every BL that came out under the sun and watched all of them because the number was very manageable, about 15 a year in general. But now that there's 50, probably more in the next couple of years, what do? We can't know all of them and sure as hell can't watch all of them. So that special element of BL is sadly doomed to disappear. And you know, I'm making a full video on BL fatigue, but I'm not really sure we can really call it a bad thing. I just think it calls for a change. I think we're gonna have to get out of this collector mindset first, which will take a couple of years where we will be exhausted by the BL releases. But once we get used to being more picky and see only the best BL shows, I think we will be fine. Though that will sadly lead to many low-budget productions with up-and-coming actors and BL production companies not being discovered even if their show is good. We'll see. Decrease in quality. Another comment I saw a lot in my community posts was about the reason for this BL fatigue in the first place, which is not only an increase of release rates, but also a decline in quality. And frankly, my first response to that was, no, not really. And then I really thought about this. And yeah, I totally can see where those comments are coming from. I will talk about it more in my New Year video where I rank all the shows I watched in 2021. But it's sure that COVID has pushed back a lot of productions, including GMMTV ones for Thailand, which tend to overall release very successful and high quality series. And GMMTV wasn't the only one touched. So I can only imagine how it would have been if Not Me, King Porsche and Enchanté came out this year. The overall ratings of 2021 shows would have definitely been higher. But I also think COVID didn't touch every country equally. For example, Korea produced as much BL series, if not way more, and the quality was still up to par even though most series didn't convince me. Japan has also released a few series, though they always tend to release a few series a year, so that's not out of the ordinary. For me, the country that was the most touched by it though was the Philippines. 2020 was an explosion and the grand entrance of Filipino BL. And a lot of the shows were really good, even though there were still some mediocre ones. Game Boys, Hello Stranger, like in the movies, Boys Lockdown, and I'm forgetting many of them. But this year I've only watched one Filipino BL and it's Stuck on You, which was really quite good, but I haven't heard of any other shows whatsoever. And frankly, I wish I had an answer as to why Filipino BL seems to have both fallen in success and quality. But I really don't, especially since only a year ago they had a great start. So if you have an idea why, please comment down below, because I'm really confused and kinda sad for them. But overall, among all the BL shows I've watched this year in 2021, only a very select few have managed to steal my heart. And even then, I don't love them as much as my favorite series last year. But since my own BL fatigue has stopped this year, I'm not sure the decrease in quality and BL fatigue are related in my own personal case. But I have no doubt that for the many people who still suffer from BL fatigue to this day, the overall decrease in quality hasn't helped at all. To conclude, I wanted to highlight a problem I believe is here to stay with BL and might need us to change our consuming habits in order to continue enjoying the genre as much as we used to. It was really interesting to be able to gauge your opinions on the topic, and it reassured me to know that I wasn't the only one. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me more of your thoughts on the topic if you want. I'll see you next time and have a great day.